How can you make a difference on this crazy planet? Listen to nature-inspired stories and interviews with environmental educators for some new ideas. Sustainable Living News writer, nature walker, and youth educator Wendy Nadherny Fachon hosts the Story Walking Radio Hour to talk about issues that matter and to introduce you to people who are coming up with creative, sensible solutions. Let's engage with Earth, with Spirit, and with one another, heart to heart, to solve problems and co-create more meaningful life stories. Tune in to Nature's Loving Vibes every Monday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. here on the Dream Vision 7 Radio Network.
Welcome to the Story Walking Radio Hour. I'm your host, Wendy Nadherny Fachon, here on the syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For a full schedule of this channel's inspiring programming, go to dreamvision7radio.com. That's dreamvision7radio.com. You'll find the Story Walking Radio Hour show listed under the Sustainable Living tab, or you can access it through my website at storywalking.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Natural Awakenings Greater Boston and Rhode Island Magazine, the Healthy Living, Healthy Planet publication, which presents the latest news and information on natural wellness and sustainable living. Subscribe to the digital issue and view past articles online at www.naturalawakeningsboston.com. The November 2024 issue's feature story is titled Lessons for a Lifetime, How Elders Shape Our Future, which emphasizes the role elders play in connecting us with nature's cycles and nature's laws. The magazine's November content also includes a wonderful article on blissful bowls about celebrating with seasonal soups and sharing recipes that highlight sweet potatoes, parsnips, and black beans. I love trying new soup recipes, especially in the wintertime. And I offer the links to these Natural Awakenings articles on the podcast page for this episode on natural intelligence. Natural cuisine and elder guidance are among the many factors that support our natural intelligence. What do we mean by natural intelligence? We will explore this concept today with guest Cory Endrulat, a fellow human being and messenger of nature, devoted to bringing the natural intelligence of permaculture and voluntaryism to the world. Cory is the author of Natural Intelligence, The Technology of Peace, and Nature's Radical Honesty, a practical application of naturopathy, among other books. He is a teacher of natural law, an integrative health coach, and a video content creator. His content includes interviews, resources, news, analysis, dot connecting, documentaries, seminars, recipes, podcasts, live streams, and more. Cory specializes in health, education, freedom, morality, philosophy, and taking action. All of his works connect to his mission and message known as Nature is the Answer. I love that. A movement created for anyone to use in sharing timeless and universal knowledge through the generations. What is natural intelligence? On a physical level, I think it refers to an innate ability to coexist in natural balance with all other life forms on Earth. And maybe on a soul level, I think it refers to an intuitive ability to connect and communicate with all other life forms and with energetic shifts here on Earth. I believe humans, animals, and plants all have natural intelligence. And I want to share a little story walk that provides some simple evidence of this before we dive in with Cory. A couple days before Hurricane Irene came storming up the eastern coast straight towards the Narragansett Bay, I took notice of the squirrels up in our butternut tree. They were removing the green, unripened nuts from the tree, nibbling on them briefly, dropping them down to the ground, and gathering them into piles. They seemed to be prepping for the storm. Now, I knew the storm was coming because I saw it on the Weather Channel. Animals, however, know a storm is coming because they can sense significant changes in barometric or hydrostatic pressure, which can trigger their survival mechanism. And supposedly, some people can sense atmospheric pressure changes within their bodies through head pressure or like migraine headaches, through blood pressure, or through joint pain. So we have that ability as well. There's a book by Stephen Farmer titled Power Animals that has helped me cultivate my awareness of natural intelligence. Farmer stresses the importance of tuning into our inner knowingness and the physical sensations of our bodies, the shifting feelings in our guts and our natural instincts, as opposed to our domineering, overthinking, or artificially programmed minds. He assigns particular qualities of intelligence to animals. With squirrel, he highlights its quality of preparedness. He draws attention to the important lessons squirrel can teach us if we pause to watch them in their natural state of being and study their actions. He suggests that squirrels communicate a need to gather when it's time to gather, play when it's time to play, and relax when it's time to relax. When I see squirrels playing, I'm inclined to pause and watch as they chase one another up and down tree trunks, around and around, sometimes trying to hide from one another. They are spontaneous and natural in their actions. I've watched squirrels play follow the leader high among the treetops, leaping from the branch of one tree to the branch of another. And then, sometimes, I'll look out the kitchen window and see a squirrel stretched out on top of a rock ledge or a large branch, basking in the warm sun. In this way, squirrels show us what it means to live with balance, work, play, and rest. Squirrels eat well, exercise well, and sleep well. As I walked around the neighborhood, considering the coming hurricane and looking for other signs of squirrel activity, I came across a big green fruit of a black walnut and picked it up. It was almost perfectly round, and it fit beautifully in the palm of my hand. When I turned it over, I found the most startling surprise. Evidently, a squirrel had turned the nut around and around in its paws, nibbling off the green skin and exposing the inner flesh, which had been turned brown. And as I studied the brown shape, I noticed it looked like a jagged whirlwind or hurricane icon, such as one might see on a weather map. And yet, at second glance, the brown shape had also taken on the shape of a brown squirrel. And the realization gave me a chill. The nut was so remarkable that I took it home and photographed it. It was, excuse the pun, totally nutty. And I will provide a link to the photograph image on the podcast page for this episode, because you got to see this and see what I'm talking about. It's pretty wild. Now, whether the image suggests the playful intelligence of a squirrel able to create a natural piece of art, or suggests the playful intelligence of a human being, me, able to interpret such a natural form, I am unable to say. Perhaps the experience is indicative of the potential for greater connectedness between humans and animals. Could this be concrete evidence of a greater natural intelligence among all species that indigenous people have long acknowledged and most other people have yet to learn? For me, this is but one of many such mysterious human-animal encounters I have experienced. Squirrels rely entirely upon the forest for their food. Aside from their core diet of tree nuts and pine cone seeds, squirrels also eat a wide variety of seasonal foods, including tree buds, tree flowers, and berries. They love to hang out in dogwood trees for this very reason, and, well, we happen to lose a dogwood to that storm. Squirrels will eat tree sap, insects, ticks, bird eggs, and mushrooms. A healthy forest is a veritable Garden of Eden for squirrels, birds, and many other animals. It is filled with abundance. So let's think about this. Consider the vision of humans adapting the natural intelligence of a squirrel or other forest animal. Here's what it might look like. These words were written by the Nuts and Bolts Nursery Co-op at Revive the Roots in Smithfield, Rhode Island. Imagine a world where every sidewalk was shaded by a canopy of nut trees and lined with a hedgerow of berries and herbs. Every block had a forest garden full of apples and peaches and asparagus, with chickens roaming free as they turned the compost. Every yard producing vegetables for the homes, which are collectively owned and democratically managed by housing cooperatives. Imagine if the food you ate actually sequestered carbon in its production rather than emitting it, and if the farms were actually hubs of biodiversity rather than desolate monocultures. Imagine never having to go hungry because you live in an edible environment co-created with uncountable other beings, human and non-human, who help feed and support you. Imagine never feeling alone because of the constant company of the birds, the bunnies, the butterflies, and the blossoms, always just footsteps away and there to comfort you. This is the vision of a food forest. I have been working to create a food forest on my property with the notion that it may provide supplemental food that we're able to have in addition to what we buy from local farms, fruits to share with neighbors, and extra abundance to help nourish the wondrous web of life that inhabits our property, the birds, the bees, butterflies, and furry critters. So let's get ready to jump in and talk more about these ideas with our guest, Cory Endrulat. Welcome, Cory, to the Story Walking Radio Hour.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Love your story about the squirrels.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we all love a good story, right? So I wonder if you could tell us about the journey that led you to become a teacher of natural law and integrated health coach and food forest enthusiast.
Sure, yeah. So health is how I got started first. I was, young, 13, about so. With technology, able to research ingredients in the store. So I would just go shopping with my parents, and I'd be like, what is these ingredients on these different products? And as I read those products and looked up these ingredients, I'm like, how come I'm not learned about, I don't learn about this in school, and how come these ingredients are causing all sorts of crazy ailments or sort of illnesses, it seems. I mean, there's lists of side effects, and there's all these chemicals, there's all these preservatives and artificial colors and flavors. It didn't make any sense to me, and it felt kind of special to have that knowledge because no one else really had that knowledge. And I was able to look at any sort of product in the store and be like, yeah, I know what this is, I know what it's going to do to me. And once my family stopped getting sick, simply from eating clean, I realized, that made quite big of a difference. And I started working out, and growing up, as I grew up with that knowledge, I think my mindset started to change with it. Now, when I was around 18, I came across the information of natural law through a teacher named Mark Passio, because I've always held as my message, nature is the answer. I applied that in medicine, and through his teachings, I started to apply that in other areas of my life as well. I realized that, my morality came from a very strong family structure that I've had. Growing up, just simply having very supportive parents and having a lot of fun. None of us were thinking about health or the world around us so much about oh my gosh, we may be poisoned or things need to change. We weren't really thinking about that, but we were just there for each other and having fun. And over time, I realized, I had moral contradictions that I did not realize I had. I was having health contradictions, right? I was eating foods I did not think were unhealthy, but they were. And so there were all these unconscious elements within my life that I started to just wake up to and realize, man, there's a lot going on. So after I graduated high school, I became an integrative nutrition health coach and started taking clients to help with different ailments like obesity and diabetes, and then would refer those clients to other practitioners if it was more extreme than that. But for the most part in America, those rates, those statistics are rather staggering. And a lot of people still don't know about nutrition, and a lot of obesity still does exist in this country. So, there is a lot of problems, but as I shifted my mentality to learning more about natural law, which has a lot to do with morality, I realized the disease is not necessarily a physical ailment that happens purely due to nutrition. It's in the mind, too. It's in the psyche and what happens with people's belief systems and the news affecting them, giving them fear and trauma. There's a lot of other things that affect people on a mass scale to where we can treat individuals every day, but if we're not treating the whole of society, we may be in for a reevaluation of how we go about treating the root cause to the problem we have. So, I delved into natural law to that moral, mental, spiritual side, and I would say, and then the nutrition is more of that physical side, and the permaculture along with that. But these two integrate with each other, right? Permaculture is all about growing food, healthy food. Nutrition is obviously about healthy food and trying to make sure everything is most self-sustainable because that tends to be the most nutritious. So a lot of this goes hand in hand, all because it's about attuning our lives to nature.
Right. Thank you. Great. And I think what's also fascinating about the permaculture piece, I mean, you have a very holistic view, but in permaculture, you've also got all these different facets of nature supporting one another, right? In terms of how the plants interact and how the animals interact, and it's just this very holistic, I think, picture. Now, in your book, Natural Intelligence, you write, nature resonates frequencies and contains medicine everywhere. There does not need to be a singular cure for cancer, as the cure is nature itself. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so every, plant, when I mention everything has a frequency, for instance, I have a friend here in Florida who develops his own med beds, right? He creates a table, and we did this live. I record the event. It's on, different video platforms. You can find it. We had people who were coming to this event with broken knees, and, they were having all sorts of different issues. And this guy was able to put these people on the table, which resonated a certain frequency using sound, vibration, and frequency, and it healed people almost spontaneously, which would shock a lot of folks. But we experienced that in person. He was doing the muscle testing. He was showing how different lights can affect your body, different sounds, and he's got a whole playlist of different frequencies for different diseases. Incredible. He programs it. He makes all these tables himself. And it's like, wow, what is this technology? And then you go back to ancient times, like you were saying, there's knowledge that our ancestors had. It's like, wow, they were understanding frequency. Nikola Tesla talking about frequency, right, vibration, and energy. So we see some correlations with that, and that's why I figured to mention it. But when it comes to cancer cures, I mean, this is a topic that you talk about online, and actually Google will delist you. Oh my gosh, there's such a thing as a natural cancer cure. Well, all over nature, there's thousands of compounds within every single plant. And, who's to say any one of those can't be a potential healing component for any type of specific disease? There's a whole package of nutrition in something like raw milk, which is illegal in most states in America, including Florida, where I am, and yet people are still buying it because they find out it's necessary. And mothers who can't produce breast milk, it's like that's their next best bet. So it's incredible to see that there's just medicine all throughout nature, and we can tap into it if we utilize our natural intelligence and recognize that that intelligence is within nature as well. Like, we have to use our own intelligence to attune to the intelligence within the world around us. So, when I say there's all these cures, I mean, you can look at the Truth About Cancer documentary. They talk about this in detail as well. And, you have people on there saying the same exact thing. There's cures all over nature. So when we're looking for one cure for cancer, maybe we have to rethink the way we're looking at things. If we all grew food within our lives and in front of our own house, in front of our yard, even a small amount, we can do a lot using food forests and permaculture. we can create abundance right there. We create a whole nursery that can feed many, many families as people can propagate and take from that plant, put it in their own garden, and then you can cook with it, different parts of the plant. It's incredible what we can do. We simply have to open our minds to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think of nature's frequency and how frequencies play a big part in homeopathy, right? You're capturing the energy signature of a plant, and it's not necessarily the plant itself, but they've diluted it down to such a point, but they've captured the energy and the healing power of that particular plant. It's so fascinating. So I mean, we could go on and on talk about the energy of plants. But we're going to take a break here, okay?
How can parents help their teenage children navigate the challenging years between childhood and adulthood? How might parents continue to gently exert a positive influence during this critical stage of growth and development? Read The Difference Maker, written by parent and story walking radio host Wendy Nadherny Fachon. This book shares the story of her late son Neil, their relationship, and the wisdom of an enlightened teenager. The Difference Maker is a coming-of-age collection of stories that parents can share and discuss with their kids. Go to the storywalking.com website, download The Difference Maker, and become inspired.
Why would God design a heart-shaped flower that cries? In a picture book titled The Angel Heart, a curious child picks such a flower and carefully pulls it apart, one poetic petal at a time, to reveal the answer. Discover the miracle of the heart and its role in providing comfort, joy, and peace. Written in the language of love, this uplifting story is sure to open up conversations about emotions, spiritual beliefs, the circle of life, or even fairy magic. Give your favorite child the gift of love. The Angel Heart by Wendy Nadherny Fachon. Available through Amazon and Balboa Press.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back to the Story Walking Radio Hour here on the syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. I'm your host, Wendy Nadherny Fachon, and we're going to continue this episode, Natural Intelligence, with guest Cory Endrulat, teacher of natural law, integrative health coach, and author. Cory, okay, I want to talk about voluntaryism. You describe yourself as a voluntarist and ascribe to voluntaryism. For listeners unfamiliar with this term, I think voluntaryism is a doctrine that relations among people should be by mutual consent, and voluntarists are advocates of non-political, non-violent strategies to achieve a free society. Am I describing that well, or how would you talk about voluntaryism, and how do you practice it?
Yeah, you're describing it quite well, and the way I describe it is that most people actually live by voluntaryism in their everyday life. The only exception that they give to that is in politics. So, whether your moral code is the golden rule, or it's do no harm to others, or do not create a victim, do not steal, all of these basically coincide with this message of, basically every action should be based on consent. It should be voluntary. And so if you apply that through all your relationships within your life, that contradicts politics and political action, since every law is backed by violence. And every law and every government proclaims to create an authority within man. And the minute you do that, you usurp the natural intelligence that you're respecting from nature, the natural authority that you give to nature. And that essentially reduces its value, reduces your own value. You become more like a slave. There's something I talk about in my Slavery Gone for Good book, mental slavery and physical slavery, the two forms that give root to all forms of slavery. And mental slavery is the idea that you want to be a slave or that you want to not be free, right? And this might sound controversial, but there's been many philosophers and psychologists who have detailed this, even Carl Jung, who calls it specifically state slavery. And it's very shocking to me. And anybody in the health field, I definitely recommend they look into this. I have a project over 24 hours detailing this mindset that's never really been done before in history called Health Revealed. And we have the website healthrevealed.org, where it's extremely detailed on the psychology of it, of totalitarianism, of authoritarianism, how that all begins, how it continues. Because democide is the top cause of unnatural death. If you look at World War II, you see crazy catastrophe. So this is the result of many people order following, suppressing their conscience, suppressing their natural intelligence within themselves and, again, throughout the world that they perceive as above, so below. And that's the principle of correspondence in Hermeticism, right? So voluntarism is really basic. You know, like I said, most people live by that simple idea, like that non-aggression principle, do no harm to others. It's simply through politics they believe they have some sort of justification for the greater good, for the common good of society, to impose their will on others and say, this is how reality should work, and if you do not like it, then, you know, violence will be done unto you. And there's a lot of euphemisms and certain terminology that hides this direct honesty, which is also why I wrote my book, you know, Nature's Radical Honesty. But if we're truly being honest with ourselves, we should live and let live, right? Let people live their own lives. And I think most people can ascribe to voluntarism once they learn about it. It's very unifying worldwide. I believe it's the future of, you know, politics and most moral ideas, since it is unifying. You could even think of your own moral philosophy and simply do not impose it on others. Whatever it is, right? You don't have to agree with me on permaculture. You may say, hey, I don't want to really grow anything, even if it's super easy, so, and that's fine, right? You live your own life as you please. I think that's an incredible idea. And, you know, there's different figures throughout history who have promoted this. You go as far back to even Taoism from ancient China. These were known as some of the first voluntarists, right? And this term also gets associated with anarchism, but to not get confused with, you know, the anarchy you may see on television with people, you know, throwing fire in the streets and people putting, you know, masks on and creating chaos. The word simply means no rulers, not no rules. And of course, there are rules we have to abide to. These we call natural laws, right? If we jump off a cliff, there's certain effects to our behavior that happen. And so this can be scientifically determined. You know, how do we create order versus chaos in the world? Well, in the aggregate, how many people are committing certain actions that lead to such manifestation of events? So if we track it down, we realize if we allow any harm, allow any evil, it's going to grow inevitably. So when we create something called a limited government, or we put a slave onto a new plantation, the slave is still a slave, the individual still being imposed upon. You can expect those systems to become increasingly tyrannical over time, and even shift in their euphemisms to make them more deceptive, so that way the slave or the citizen willingly submits and more so willingly complies. So it can get quite dangerous, the mindsets, when you start diving deeper into this. And I encourage anybody in the educative field, anybody in environmental education, anybody in any field whatsoever to study this, because if you have anybody who's order following, suppressing their conscience, they're willing to do untold amounts of evil.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And, you know, I think often, you know, about the environment and how we, you know, caring for the environment. And, you know, there are a lot of people who want laws in order to, well, they say protect the environment, or, you know, certain things that we should be doing. And yet, if we, I feel as if we had just used our natural inclinations, that we might, you know, help nature kind of take care of itself and we take care of it, and not necessarily having laws that require us to take care of it. I mean, I wish it was that way in an ideal world. Any of your comments on that, Cory? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's a great point to make. Because, you know, the abolitionists could have said, well, let's pass a law and make slavery illegal to make it immoral. But instead, they said, let's not use political action, and let's actually inspire people and educate them to become moral, conscientious people so they can take control of themselves, because the slaves did not know how to read or write for themselves. They didn't know they owned themselves. For a lot of them, that was just part of life and part of society, and for the average public that upheld it. And so the same thing goes with a lot of these ideas that we share that are new for a lot of folks and may be fearful to them and maybe something completely new. So there's cognitive dissonance that we have to face, simply sharing that information. And, what I have to say is that that moral invigoration, that inspiration needs to take place in people. And as long as you do not have that, you're only going to be doing symptom management and short-term solutions that are not long-term and lasting and sustainable. It needs to be ingrained within the hearts of man, these ideas of working with nature and working, not suppressing your conscience and not obeying authority figures, for people to truly take charge of their life. If they keep externalizing that to the laws and to the politicians to be the source of truth and creating all the things that they want in the world, they're never going to be truly free.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about that.
Yeah. Education.
Sometimes I feel like we rely on government to solve all our problems, and they're not. Government has not been solving our problems. They really, it's interesting. They don't seem to be. Maybe some of the stuff they do is good, but not always all of it. But go on.
Sorry. There is a document that, if you're interested, I think it details this quite well, called The Superiority of Moral Power Over Political Power by the abolitionist Aidan Ballou, where he specifically explains how moral power is way more powerful than political power in pretty much every single way. And he breaks it down in his document. And so the abolitionists being such an interesting group of individuals, because you have to bear in mind they were willing to break the law to free slaves, and they even created towns through the Underground Railroad. I found that fascinating history. We learn a little bit about slavery in school, and maybe we learn about abolitionism and African Americans, but slavery was a worldwide phenomenon that lasted for thousands of years, and people were very much conditioned into it. It took a big moral shift for people to say after thousands of years that it's immoral and should be done away with completely. Not that it should be gradually reduced and that the slaves should have better conditions and get new owners. No, but that it should be immediately abolished. A very radical position at the time, but now we wouldn't call it radical. We would simply call it natural and a way of life. So something to think about.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you'd mentioned earlier how important the education piece is. I think you feel like doing the work that I do with this radio hour and you doing the content that you put out there, it's giving people more information, and if they're inspired by something that you say or I say or that someone else says, and it leads them to take, moral action, whether it's to, in abolishing slavery or improving the environment, improving education itself, whatever that might be. I think we all have special gifts and skills where once we, receive the input that we need through education or whatever, and we're inspired, we've got these gifts that each of us individually has our own natural gifts that we can then bring forth into the world and create a better place. So now I want to talk about Natural Intelligence, the book you've written. The subtitle for Natural Intelligence is The Technology of Peace. And in your book, you make the following statement, which kind of ties into what we're talking about here. I'm responsible for all the emotions and the results that I receive in my life. I am able to respond in a way that's ethical, moral, and does no harm to fellow humans. You want to talk more about this responsibility? Yes.
Well, it ties in with the previous question as well. When we're talking about this idea of self-ownership and voluntary interactions, because we respect somebody else's self-ownership and their freedom to also live their own life. So we are becoming responsible over what we truly own and letting others be responsible over what they truly own and encouraging that responsibility, perhaps educating them, allowing them to have that ability. And now we can try to give away that ability to others, but then we're not necessarily responsible or in control of ourselves as much as we are. or should be, right? So it's all about empowerment, and encouraging that aspect of responsibility is super important. So again, the conscience, responsibility, these internal factors, this constitutes our natural intelligence. And when we nurture that, we start to see it in people. We say, wow, in ancient times, they would call this a master or a sage, somebody who can, provide tons of wisdom, who can do amazing different talents, right? Because they took the time and energy to do it. They worked on themselves, they worked on the environment, on their tools, on their craft, and they showed it by example. And that right there is a powerful form of education. That is real leadership. And people voluntarily emulate their actions and willingly follow voluntarily without necessarily claiming to be an authority figure, putting on a certain crown and saying, you have to obey me and I have the right to rule. Very different. These are folks who I think are inspiring, like Jim Gale, for instance, from Food Forest Abundance. He's got 50 acres. He's showing the solution. He's not paying taxes and he's not asking for permission to build certain buildings on his land. He's simply showing the solution, living that solution, unafraid. Civil disobedience, one of the most effective strategies throughout history to create a change. And it's just incredible because everybody who goes there is inspired. And, he's got off-grid Airbnbs and grazing animals. And it's just an example of somebody taking the responsibility of saying, you know what, the world has to change. And he was a billionaire who, had everything, retired at a young age. And he's like, life has more to offer than this. So he found it to be that responsibility, that moral obligation to say, if nobody's going to change the world and share this knowledge, who will? I have to do it. So he got this land, and now he's inviting world leaders. He's trying to develop strategies. We wrote this book together, and it's amazing seeing where it's going because it inspires me a lot to also be more self-responsible. We need those reminders of accountability for ourselves and to encourage that within ourselves because we can do incredible things if, again, we set our minds to it.
Yeah, be the change you want to see in the world, right?
Yes.
We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but it's time for our next station break. So I'm your host, Wendy Nadherny Fachon, here on the syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network, and you're listening to the Story Walking Radio Hour. The purpose and mission of the Story Walking Radio Hour is to open minds and foster positive difference-making here on planet Earth. Learn more about Story Walking and find more of our podcasts at storywalking.com. We'll be back in a moment to continue this discussion on natural intelligence with our guest, Cory Endrulat.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
Permaculture or permanent agriculture is an intentional and efficient arrangement of perennial plants and free-ranging livestock that support one another. Each species serves a special purpose or multiple purposes within the permaculture community. So rainwater channeling, propagation, nitrogen fixing, composting, and so on. Nature grows the food, and we kind of help it along. So, Cory, in your book, you explain the potential of growing abundance through permaculture to prevent scarcity and war and to promote peace. So what are the various components of this reality that lead to your vision of peace?
Yes. When we have mass adoption of growing food instead of lawns, we can see a huge shift occur within society because there's more acreage of lawns, of those perfectly, manufactured lawns, most of them artificial, where we spray tons of chemicals on them. This is not providing any yield. There's more acres of lawn than there is a lot of our crops, our main crops combined. And it's incredible to see that if we simply replace that and have that for the schools, the prisons, the churches, we don't have to have scarcity, which is one of the leading causes for war. Now, of course, the other cause would be, again, that voluntaryism aspect of the mental and moral, which is do not suppress your conscience, do not worship authority figures. But when we have these two in unison, voluntaryism and permaculture, we have the ideas of the future that create peace, right? And again, it's within us. It's within our environment. It's right in front of us, these solutions. We simply need to realize it. It's all about using the same resources we have now, but simply shifting our focus as to where we put those resources, right? Are we investing our resources wisely? Do we have a waste of space, essentially? Because every fence can be a food fence, right? You can have things climbing up the fences. You can have grapes and olives and tomatoes. And sweet potatoes. Absolutely. Down here in Florida, tons of sweet potatoes. You can grow, like we took some from Gulf's Landing and you just take off, and I've been giving that to people even on the train. It's like I've been giving it to people all over the place because you just create a free energy system of abundance. So when you realize abundance is easy, when you just know the right plants, and then also when you put in certain plants together through a guild, that is using your intelligence to support the intelligence within nature. All you're doing is replicating the intelligence of forests, but instead creating a food forest, right? And so you create a lot of biodiversity, a lot of insects and animals. As you mentioned, it's a wildlife of abundance, and it's radically different from imagining a very sterile, artificial, mechanical world that we might envision. We would not be able to live in that environment, unless we had some sort of trees and some sort of nature. And everyone I meet pretty much loves nature. So we cannot forget that component. Why not surround ourselves more with it as we move into the age of AI and technology? And we're not against artificial intelligence simply because we wrote a book on natural intelligence. It's simply about using our resources wisely. Are we using AI for NI? And if we don't, it may come at the expense of our own health, as we see. It may come at the expense of our own humanity. But we come to realize, because nature teaches us all these lessons, that we have to pay attention to our health and our humanity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we have a little bit of time left to talk about some of your various projects, because I know you've been in this work not for a long time, but you're very prolific and you're creating all kinds of videos and writing all kinds of books. And what do you have going on now? What's next?
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend the Health Revealed project is huge, right, with medical whistleblowers. And it's for anybody in the medical field, this is definitely up your alley. But like I said, any other field, this is for everybody to learn about the medical side of things, how we shift the medical system, but also the political and social systems that give rise to disease as well through, mass psychosis and mass hysteria and mass formation and psychopathologies. And there's many other ways to describe this idea, this groupthink that happens in a lot of folks, leading to a mass amount of fear and trauma that can affect generations of time, which can lead to a numerous amount of diseases where physicians don't know how to treat it. We need to completely revision the way we are treating others and not necessarily, like I said, stay focused on the individual, although we do want to stay focused on the individual when we're, very focused on throwing numbers at people and saying, you got to go on this drug and let's use this drug to focus on that drug and to treat that drug and that symptom. And we tend to be tracing the symptoms all day and we never really get to the root cause. So I think if anybody is out there and they're confused and they want to know, well, what are the solutions and what can we do together, this project is very collaborative and massive. So you'll get a full scope of what is going on currently and how we move into that new paradigm. So that's called Health Revealed, healthrevealed.org. I run a website, theliberator.us. That I have a newspaper. I have ways for people to network with each other, action steps, many different action steps, that, again, all non-political, all encouraging the education of the individual, consciousness and conscience, and different views on spirituality, on health, everything that is universal and timeless, right? Because this work really is, if we're looking at nature, and we're not looking at just the material and man-made things within our world. We're looking at how do we shift things toward, again, aligning our lives to nature That's why my main channel name, if you want to look it up, is Cory Nature is the Answer. So that's every single platform.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Yeah,
you mentioned fear, and there's been just a lot of fear-based things going on. And also, like, there's a language that I think language can definitely create a certain fear. Like, for example, people will say climate crisis, right? And the word crisis, like, paralyzes you. And whereas I prefer to use words like climate challenge, because it says, yeah, it's a problem, but a challenge is a challenge. It's something you can overcome, right? It's something you can solve. Just what are your thoughts on fear-based, language, and just, I see a lot of this in the media, a lot of fear in language, and the whole language piece.
Yes, and I even see it in the independent media as well, unfortunately, because people become reactory, and they're not necessarily responding consciously, taking the time to take a step back and say, what am I going to respond with? Right. So if we live in a very reactory, fight or flight mode type of way, and we tend to, at least statistically, most people are every day, and they're drinking coffee and they're eating a lot of sugar, right? They're a very fast-paced world. Got to go there, got to go there. It tends to be very stressful on the body. And so, definitely something to pay attention to. But yeah, I definitely noticed the language. Some example that I like to give is, the word natural disaster, right? I mean, it's a disaster. It's a natural disaster, but scientists and people have been starting to recognize that doesn't have to be a disaster. Like, it's more like a hazard. It's something that can be a disaster, but it doesn't have to be. And if we start to reevaluate, what we think is true, we recognize we do have the possibility to undo things that we may say are undoable, right? Perhaps we may call ourselves a diabetic and say, I have diabetes and it's just part of who I am. But another way we can look at it is I'm undergoing this thing called diabetes, but I am not a diabetic. I'm much more than that. I can get past that condition. It's an empowerment point of view that says I have control. I'm not going to be enslaved to the disease. I'm not going to be enslaved to any certain system or ideology. I am my unique self.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, for different audiences, I mentioned schools, churches, and prisons, and of course, there's a lot I have to share. To break it down very simply, Jim Gale and myself and others who are leaders in different industries, we made documents that are one-pages for each audience that you can find on nita.one, NITA.1, and that stands for Nature is the Answer, right? So nita.one, and you'll see there's documents for every audience. There's also a trailer for the book that we did, and several other resources, so you can learn about the strategy very simply. What is the problem? War, political corruption. We know what the problems are. If you notice, I didn't talk too much about the problems here because I want to shift to the solution. So, talk about language. It's how we come across. Are we going to talk about the problems all day, or are we going to share the things that people don't learn about? There's a lot of things people don't know about, and we have mass information at our fingertips, so do we use it? We have the ability to do more than ever before. The abolitionists were successful because they had the printing press. They were able to share their information en masse. They used newspapers and meetings and creating their own towns to bring people together. Well, we can do the same thing now on an even bigger scale. Something can go viral overnight if some public figure says, hey, we got to take out poisons and grow food instead of lawns. It becomes a hashtag, grow food, not lawns. And now all of a sudden you see a shift in the mentality of people. So it really can be that simple if we do a little bit of outreach. So we made these documents for individuals for that purpose. So for anybody listening, be sure to share with people like Joe Rogan or Elon Musk or whoever you can think is influential, whatever you think about them. I think this is an idea that can bring a lot of people together no matter where they are from. And the same thing, goes for voluntaryism. These are ideas that most people simply never heard of that can really shift the way we do things.
No, absolutely. I think we need to create healthy healthy information, healthy influencers too. I feel like a lot of the influencers, like I was reading an article this morning about people who, influencers who are pushing weight loss drugs, right? And that's not positive influence. I mean, they're pushing drugs that actually have horrible long-term side effects. And, weight loss is really all about eating more healthy. It's about moving your body, getting out and walking, getting a lot, sleeping well, reducing the stress in your life, all the natural, right? All the natural things. So I think, nature is the answer. Absolutely. And there's so much we can do. It's all positive. It's all about this show. My show, the work that you do, it's all about the solutions. We got to mention the problems just to give context, but it's all about the solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the crazy thing is, sometimes the solution is dissolution, right? So, meaning we have to simply get rid of the things that we thought were solutions, but are actually the problems, right? How many times are the drugs causing disease, but we say we have them to help with another disease? And how many times do we have a law that we say, is needed for this problem, but it's the law causing more problems? We have this habit because we cannot get to the root cause. And so, from a Taoist point of view, from an ancient China, spirituality point of view, it's used across many different conditions, different traditions. It's about returning to that uncarved block, that simplistic natural state, which requires getting past our conditioning, getting past our belief systems and our cultural norms to recognize our unique, authentic selves.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Cory, we could talk on and on, but it's time to conclude today's episode. Maybe we'll get you on again. Listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Cory and his work, we're going to provide resource links on the podcast page. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with friends and family. Help us grow our community of listeners and difference makers so we can work together to build a better world. All of our podcasts are free online. You go to storywalking.com to learn more. And we air on the syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. You can listen online or on your mobile device anywhere, anytime, while you're walking or gardening or while you're inside preparing dinner or sipping a warm cup of tea. And I just want to thank you for joining us here today on the Story Walking Radio Hour. I'm your host, Wendy Nadherny Fachon, with my guest, Cory Endrulat. And we love you all and wish you a world of abundance and goodness going forward from here.